Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We're back for a second hour, and we've decided today that we were going to talk about
forgiveness a little bit, letting go of grudges and bitterness. It's not the whole topic of forgiveness by any means, but it's something that I think we should at least talk about a little bit. So let's start with...
There was a stage in a previous show where we decided we were going to talk about forgiveness because we realized, talking in different, about different issues, about mental health, mental well-being, that one of the crucial ways of getting that peace, the sakina, is to forgive.
And forgive as in letting go of grudges and bitterness that's personal to you. Like, when you're upset with somebody or someone. So when someone you care about hurts you, you can hold on to anger, resentment, and thoughts of revenge. You can do two things. You can forgive, or you can move forward. Now, I've had a hard time personally with that forgiveness part, because I always assumed in the past that once you forgive, that means that you let that person back in your life. You have to be buddies. No, and my husband, alhamdulillah, he always reminds me that just because you forgive someone, it doesn't mean now you can go back to being best friends or anything like that. It's just for your own mental health, for the fact that you want Allah also to forgive you, because we all make mistakes. No one comes out of this life perfect. We should forgive and move forward, right? So this is it. So, and I'm asking this question to our audience: who hasn't been hurt by the actions or words of another? We all have at some point. Perhaps a parent has done something with their constant criticism, as many parents do, due to their upbringing. That's like a common thing. Maybe someone at work sabotaged you, or a partner has done something to really hurt you. Those are traumatic experiences, really, and they can really affect you physically and emotionally, right? Because that's what holding on to anger does, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So when someone hurts you, you can either decide, okay, revenge, or you're gonna go and do something to them, you at least hold bitterness in your heart when their name is mentioned, or when you have to deal with them in any sort of form. But really, that's not good for us, and it causes a lot of you can get blood pressure from this. Like, it affects you physically. Okay, so if we don't forgive, we end up paying it, and we can pay for it dearly by physical manifestation of some disease, like I said, blood pressure or something, or headaches, right? So I recommend to you and to me that we try to embrace some form of forgiveness, so we could become more peaceful. We can embrace hope, gratitude, and joy, right? So consider how forgiveness can lead you down the path of physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. I think we have to consider it. I have to say again that with certain people in my life, I was resistant to it, and I probably still have to work on that with some people. But you can recognize how important it is, even if you're having a hard time with it, right? So what is forgiveness? Forgiveness means different things to different people. Generally, however, it involves a decision to let go of resentment and thoughts of revenge. Must I? I don't know. What do you think, Safiya? Yes, I'm actually amazed when people who have every right to seek revenge or want revenge to actually forgive. And I'll give you a story of I wouldn't say she was a close friend of mine. She passed away, and shortly after she passed away, her son, one of her sons, she had 6 amazing sons. And while he was in working, delivering pizza, he was killed by the people he was delivering pizza to. This was in the United States. And it was already like, wow, that happened to him. His father, so they arrested the people who actually did this. His father, when he went to court to face the accuser, he actually forgave him. He forgave him, and it was a big thing on Facebook and social media. I mean, unless you weren't following this, but within the Muslim social media, it was a big thing that he actually went up to him and hugged him and told him he forgave him. And I was thinking, what would I do? Most of us would be like thinking, oh, wait, I'll show you, because we do feel in this country that justice is not done all the time. And a lot of people will take justice into their own hands, which, by the way, is un-Islamic. But still, when you're angry.
Yeah, I
So this was like a thing I had to ask myself, would I do it? So the act of being offended might always be with you. Like, you're gonna keep playing it in your head. This person spoke to me like this, did that to me. But if you decide to forgive, that thing that happened will have a less grip on you, and you won't be obsessed with it, and it will help free you from the control of the person who harmed you. Because let's be fair, if you're constantly mad at someone, it takes energy to stay angry and upset with someone, and you're always thinking of them. So in effect, they kind of control you. So you just have to let go of that. Also, if you forgive, you can start to understand and have empathy for that person who hurt you. I know it seems impossible. It's not going to happen in all situations, and I can actually think of some situations that I'm not sure I want to talk on this radio about. But when we say forgive, we're not saying forgive anything and everyone, and it's up to you.
And also, it's not in forgiving as if the person had not done anything wrong. So if you think about extreme cases of abuse or murder, or like terrible things that happen, say to a child or to someone from your family or something, it's you're not saying, oh, it's okay that the person did that. Not at all.
No, and I'm not even saying that you must forgive or else
you're a bad person.
You're a bad person. No, this is a recommendation.
Forgiving is more kind of you let go of that attachment to the thing that has hurt you, and you kind of accept it happened. There's an element of acceptance, isn't there? That this is what happened, and I'm not going to let this control me and hurt me over.
And also, it's for our own mental health, and not that you ever wanna not hold responsible the person who hurt you badly. They should still be held responsible.
You can still, seek compensation if it's a thing that you can do legally. There's nothing wrong with that, definitely.
Exactly, because forgiveness brings like a kind of peace that helps you go on with your life. So you're not constantly thinking of the act.
Yeah, it's like not letting that act or that hurt control you, define you, limit you,
be a victim,
and be a
victim, because
because we do say that anger eats at you, and it's really as a physical thing. You can feel it inside, and it does have physical repercussion in your health if you're constantly angry and unforgiving.
I just noticed that when you're angry at someone, it's something you have to keep in your mind somewhere. Like, you have to hold it in order to remember, and then every time they're brought up or you see them, those feelings
comes back. It's a bit like PTSD. It's like a self-inflicted PTSD at some point. Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the benefits of forgiving someone. Okay. Letting go of grudges and bitterness can make way for improved health and peace of mind. So it could lead to healthier relationships. It could lead to improved mental health, less anxiety, stress, and hostility, and a lower blood pressure. it could, in some cases, reduce symptoms of depression. And actually, a stronger immune system. You heard it here first.
This is really, it's true. It's
Improved
true.
heart health and improved self-esteem. So, but let's talk about this. Why is it so easy to hold a grudge? Being hurt by someone, particularly someone you love and trust, can cause anger, sadness, and confusion. Because you're like thinking, why did they do that? Like, you're shocked, especially if somebody's really close to you, right? But if you dwell on these events or situations, grudges filled with resentment, vengeance, and hostility can take root, which is why we think about it over and over again, and then we kind of like obsess about it. So if you allow negative feelings to crowd out positive feelings, you might find yourself swallowed up by your own bitterness or sense of injustice. So some people are naturally more forgiving than others. I really do admire people who are very forgiving, but at the same time, in the past, they've annoyed me too. It's like, how dare you? You have no right to forgive that person because they didn't hurt, they hurt, so and so. And it's like, I still have to work some stuff out about forgiveness in my mind.
I think this is a natural human thing that we feel we're right. A wrong has been done to us. We want to repair it. We want justice to be done. We want, it's our natural desire for justice and order, and truthfulness, honesty, all of these values that make the world such a much better place. But you were giving that example of that family who forgave the murderer of their son, who was a delivery guy in America. There was another case as well recently where a guy killed another, and the Muslim father stood up at the end. So he got sentenced, but he stood up and he went to hug him. And he was asked, how could you do this? He killed your son. He said, well, I did not want his act, his terrible act, to control me and to have a hold on me forever. And also by doing this, imagine, astaghfirullah, imagine you're a murderer, right? And you've just done this thing, you've been sentenced. Maybe you don't show it, but you might feel very remorseful. And in actual fact, most situations, especially when it's gang warfare, when it's related to that, you do feel remorseful somewhere, because maybe your anger brought you to do that, maybe your gang forced you to do that, or circumstances, whatever, that were maybe a little bit out of your control, you felt you had to do it. Even if it's just a murder that you did yourself by yourself, there's always an element of humanity, often, not always, often, because there are some people who are completely unrepentant and they're very evil.
Well, those were the serial killers.
Yeah, and very evil. But in a lot of these circumstances, it's just a terrible, sad situation. And for the dad, because the dad hugged him, what do you think that boy is going to feel after that? He's going to first feel much more forgiving towards himself, and also much more keen to try and change his ways, because it would be seen as like, oh, I'm given a second chance. Maybe this is my opportunity to change. Maybe, that little impetus that sometimes you need to change.
But if you don't forgive yourself, which we're talking about forgiving others and letting go of bitterness and such, but even forgiving yourself is hard because you've heard of the stories of those American soldiers. They don't talk about much on the news, but if you look into it, a lot of them suffer from PTSD.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, apparently more American soldiers kill themselves than they were killed in the battle, and that has to go back to how they're not forgiving themselves. Well, what they feel so horrible about what they've done, they're reliving it in their head, and in the end they can't stand anymore and they kill themselves. Now they might not be talking about it, but we're assuming we're we're not that we can figure out what's going on here. This just means that they can't forgive themselves.
Yeah, this is the right time to play a little snippet of nugget of wisdom by Yasmin Mujahid,
Yes.
Which is called "Forgiving Will Free You." So let's listen to that, see what she has to say.
Islamic Reminders on Heritage Radio.
The way in which you do not allow others to break you is by your ability to respond in the way that grows you rather than breaks you. And by forgiving, you're taking back that power. Because you're saying, you can't control me, you can't break me. I am going to take whatever has happened in my life and I'm going to use it to become stronger. And I'm going to let it go. And I'm going to forgive, not for you, but actually for me. I'm going to forgive because number one, that frees me. And most importantly, it allows me to get the forgiveness of Allah. So it's a win-win. But you have to change the way you see it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving you an opportunity to gain the forgiveness of Allah by forgiving those who have hurt you.
MashaAllah, that was just so powerful. And she said a couple of things. So basically, yes, that forgiving frees you because you don't let that have a hold over you. But also she said this is crucially, you allow Allah to then become forgiving towards you, because if you should always think, I'm not going to forget so that others forgive me. It's I'm going to forgive so that others forgive me. It's I'm going to forgive so that Allah forgives me. So I'm going to basically behave with others the way I would like Allah to behave towards me. So it's a triangular relationship, not just you and the other person.
Yeah.
You put Allah in
the picture,
and you ensure that Allah will forgive you for your sins, your bad action, the moment where you hurt others willingly or unwillingly, and that is really, really crucial to remember that.
Well, let's just talk a little bit about what's happening to you physically or mentally when you're not forgiving, when you're holding it to the grudge.
I think this is really important.
And what could be happening is you bring the anger and the bitterness into every relationship, and you experience it. Maybe if someone did something to your friend or a spouse, and now their ex, when you come to a new relationship, you holding on to that anger and bitterness, and it taints the new relationship, and you're treating them like they've done you wrong even though they haven't done anything wrong. So that's not good either. You can become so wrapped up in the wrong that you can't enjoy the present. You become depressed or anxious. By holding on to the grudge, you feel that your life lacks meaning or purpose, or that you're at odds with your spiritual beliefs, because most spiritual beliefs encourage forgiveness, right? And the other thing is you lose valuable and enriching connectedness with others.
Yeah,
because you're so busy holding on to the grudge.
And expecting negative things from others, even in new relationship. This is what you said at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's that I see that so often, and in a sense you can understand it, because when the trust has been broken, say in a marriage, and you've been hurt really, really badly, and say your spouse has cheated on you, it's very hard after that. First of all, to trust that person ever again. But even then, to go back into another relationship where you actually trust the person will not do that. Yeah, it's very true.
So, yeah, it's
something to work on.
You have to work on those things.
We didn't say, by the way, this should have been our disclaimer at the beginning. By the way, these advice are not necessarily easy to implement.
No way. Like I said, in the past, I have gotten annoyed to a person who's very forgiving, and I'm always thinking, like, why? Like, do you even have a right to forgive?
Did we say also forgiveness is not a sign of weakness?
We didn't say it.
On the opposite, it actually, as we can see from what we've been saying for the last half an hour, it's a sign of strength.
It is.
So don't think by being forgiven you're being weak and being walked all over. No, you're, like Yasmin, which I had just said, you're basically taking this back and making it your strength.
So how do we reach a state of forgiveness? Well, some ideas here. Forgiveness is a commitment to a personal process of change. To move from suffering to forgiveness, you might recognize the value of forgiveness and how it can improve your life. So you actually have to believe that it's a good thing to do. Otherwise,
So it starts by listening to this show today. That might actually shed a light on things that you may not have thought of before.
Exactly. You can identify what needs healing and who needs to be forgiven and for what. Actually, maybe somebody doesn't even know they need forgiving. They might not even know that someone is upset with them. You might consider joining a support group or seeing a counselor, depending on what's happened, and because some things you need help to overcome, and counseling. You might acknowledge your emotions about the harm done to you and how they affect your behavior and work to release them. Again, it sounds like you could use a professional person to help you get through this. It's important, right? You need to choose to forgive the person who's offended you. Otherwise, you could saying it, you have to actually feel it. It is, again, another mindset approach. Move away from your role as a victim and release the control and power the offending person and situation have had in your life, like Sister Yasmin Mujahid said. Right? So as you let go of these grudges, you'll no longer define your life by how you've been hurt, and you might even find compassion and understanding.
So this is important as understanding, because sometimes, yes, we've been hurt, some wrong has been done to us, but we've not seen the other person's point of view. We've refused to see that actually their reaction had a reason that was totally justified for them, and either we were collateral damage unwillingly, this happened, or what we feel was an injustice done to us was actually wasn't an injustice. Why? Because we sometimes put ourselves in that sort of role of or position of like people owe us something, or people have, I don't know how to express it. It's like maybe a little bit of like arrogance. An element of arrogance, and or people, they should be doing this for me, or they should treat me that way, whatever. But actually, no. Why should they treat you that particular way? And no, what's so special about you? You're just another human being, and you're part of their sphere. But it does not mean that they owe you anything, or you should expect anything from them. Just be a kind, normal person, and then things will naturally happen that are nice and pleasant for you. So understanding the situation, I think, is quite crucial.
Well, I'm gonna talk about a personal matter in it. Like, it's not too personal. It's something that will help illustrate this process, right? Of going from being mad at somebody to forgiving. Is my grandmother. She was very unkind, and all the grandkids could, even today would say she was mean, and one of our grandmothers, and she was a hard person to be around. She made it really hard to like her, and in fact most of us as kids, we didn't like her. So what happened as I got older and I started learning more about her and her childhood and her life, I eventually started thinking, oh, poor grandma. And I'm thinking, wow, where did you get this? I started learning that she was an orphan, she was a child refugee, she had a stepmom, she grew up really poor because of being a refugee. She grew up living in poor conditions. When she got married, she was young. She had lots of kids, like 6. She was really poor. And I think what happened to her when we read all this and see all this is that basically she had a lot of bitterness about how her life turned out. She held a lot of grudges, and she couldn't let go.
And also,
it affected her and treated people that didn't do anything to her. Like the grandkids didn't do anything to her, but also, she held on to all those grudges, and it made her for a very difficult person.
There's also there's a process called what's it called, detachment, where you basically make sure people don't like you, so you don't get attached to them, so you don't get hurt
That's possibly also.
And that comes generally from childhood trauma of that nature, where you've been abandoned or.
Well, she might not even know she was doing it, but
No, of course
No, she lived by herself, even though in the village
It's a
her
self-fulfilling
had
prophecy.
kids
No
and
one
other
likes me,
people,
therefore.
other family members were living there, but she would not. She was not easy to live with. So, anyways, so what happens though if you can't forgive someone?
That can happen, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and like
And
you
in fact,
said,
in the Quran, in Islam, we are, there's a verse in the Quran where Allah explains how beneficial forgiveness is, especially in case of murder. You can't forgive the murderer. It is better for you, yes, because you don't hold on to a thing, onto it, okay? But there is nothing wrong if you don't forgive that person. It's not an obligation or a requirement for you, or a sin or whatever, but as we've seen, mentally, emotionally, physically, it will allow you to detach yourself, and the person still probably will have to pay for somehow, even if you forgive, you don't apply all of the punishment.
well, we have the story of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and his uncle was murdered by I think his name was Habshi.
Hind.
Hind.
Yeah.
She put out the contract, but the man who actually
Yes, sorry, yes.
did the act,
Yeah.
right? He eventually became Muslim, but the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam couldn't bear to meet with him.
Yeah.
He took his shahada, but he still.
So he's trying
There's-
to forget, but I'm sure in his heart he did forgive him, obviously, because Allah forgave him from the moment he took his shahada, and Allah brought that man to Islam. But you don't necessarily have to be with the person who hurt you all the time. You don't have to interact. You don't have. There's no obligation to do that.
So Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has given us examples of that too. So because forgiveness can be challenging, especially if the person who's hurt you doesn't admit wrong, right? Because that has been one of my questions in the past, like, why should you forgive them? They didn't even say sorry for what they did, right? So if you find yourself stuck, some ideas around that is to find empathy, to practice empathy, to try to see the situation from the other person's point of view, like I did with my grandmother. You can ask yourself why he or she would behave in such a way. Perhaps you would have reached similarly behavior, like you would be the same if you face the same situation. You could also reflect on times you've hurt others and on those who've forgiven you, right? Because that's another thing that Sister Yasmin was saying. You could write a journal. This really helps. You can pray and talk about it with a person you trust. Then you find them wise and compassionate to give you good advice. But in other cases, such as like a spiritual leader, a mental health provider, or an impartial loved one or friend, so that could help. And be aware that forgiveness is a process, and even small hurts may need to be revisited and forgiven over and over again. Now, this one really does help me, because sometimes you want to forgive somebody, but it's just not happening. You
don't give up. Yeah. Don't give up trying.
So that's it. Now the question to ask is, does forgiveness guarantee a reconciliation? I have to say that was the reason why I resist the idea of forgiving somebody who didn't even ask for forgiveness, because I don't want to forgive them, because in my head it meant you have to reconcile. And no, you don't have to reconcile.
No, that's your own process of how you deal with the situation yourself.
If the hurtful event involved someone whose relationship you otherwise value, forgiveness can lead to a reconciliation, right? But it's not always the case.
It's because you would approach the person differently. You will not feel so bitter and angry when you interact with them. Say it's someone at work, someone you see every day, or a sibling, someone you see all the time, or the fact that you've forgiven them, that means that next time you see them, you're going to interact with them in a calmer, maybe gentler manner, which will then open the door for them to be maybe eventually asking for forgiveness, although you've already done it, or to talk to you in a way that is a lot more productive because of the way you behave.
And in fact, reconciliation might be impossible if the offender has died or is unwilling to communicate with you and even ask for forgiveness. So in other cases, reconciliation might not be appropriate. Still, forgiveness is possible even if reconciliation isn't. So that's advice to someone who feels like somebody's mad at you. They feel like you've done them wrong. Okay, you don't think you have, but you want to be clear with Allah, so you apologize, right? But you do it only because you want to have a clear heart, but don't expect them to decide then, oh, now we're gonna reconcile. Just do it for your sake, if you're gonna do that, right? What if a person, that's another question. What if the person I'm forgiving doesn't change? What would you do then? So getting another person to change his or her actions or behavior or words isn't the point of forgiveness.
Exactly.
You do it for yourself. You think of forgiveness.
Other people
No,
all the time.
you don't. You do it for yourself. You can only control yourself. You think of forgiveness more about how it can change your life by bringing you peace, happiness, and emotional, spiritual healing.
But also, I'll go back to what I said earlier. If you have forgiven them, your behavior will automatically change when next time you encounter them. So it opens the door to a new relationship, and that is something that to really remember.
Forgiveness basically takes away the power the other person continues to wield in your life. So you don't get mad anymore when you think about it. They can't do anything to you.
So my question would be then, what if I'm the one who needs forgiveness? What would happen?
It's something, right? I think the first step is to honestly assess and acknowledge the wrongs you've done and how they affected others. That's a lot of people have a hard time with admitting
You've got
it.
to be very humble, and it's essential, isn't it, to accept that you're not a perfect person. You do mistakes. You do hurt others.
And while at the same time you avoid judging yourself too harshly. You know,
because again, we're human and we're
Yeah.
not perfect.
If you're truly sorry for something you've said or done, consider admitting it to those you've harmed. Speak of your sincere sorrow and regret, and ask for forgiveness without making excuses.
Yeah.
You know, and remember, however, you can't force someone to forgive you. Others need to move to forgiveness in their own time. And whatever happens, commit to treating others with compassion, empathy, and respect.
Yeah, I think I just love what you've just said throughout this last hour, because there's so many relationships that are broken. People who are suffering physically, mentally, emotionally, who are stuck in their lives, are stuck in terrible situations, and they don't want to see that they're the cause of that. Not because they're the ones who hurt the other. They're not the offenders, they're the offended, but they cannot move on from that offense. They cannot forgive the other person. They cannot accept, first of all, just even starting from accepting that it happened. That no one's perfect in this life. Only Allah is perfect, and only Jannah will have perfection.
Amen.
This world is about trial and error, trying to get better, and we so often we are so bogged down into how we have to pray, the length of our clothing, and the size of our hijabs, and the length of our beards, and all of that. But we forget the ihsan aspect of Islam, which is how to improve yourself. And what better way than to letting go of emotional attachments, of like, oh, I've been hurt by this, I've been, just. You have to let go. You have to.
We have to talk more about forgiveness in our community, because what I find is, in a lot of cases in our community, we for example, like if a parent has hurt you, our community is so against almost talking about parents hurting their kids. But the fact is, a lot of the times, a lot of parents have hurt their kids.
Yeah.
Right. With the it's not minor, but one of the minorest of hurts would be constantly criticizing and speaking ill to the children, and those children grow up, and those things you said cannot be unsaid. And if you're not willing at some point, or you have to be willing at some point to listen to them say things about that, to talk about it with you, and if you want a good and a better relation, a real relation, you have to be willing to apologize, a real apologies, and move on from that. But you cannot say, well, I'm your parent, I can say whatever I want. I'm your parent, I can do what I want. The fact is, you cannot.
And again, as we reminded everyone earlier, asking for forgiveness and accepting that you've made a mistake does not show you're weak. On the contrary, it shows you're strong. And it's going to reset the relationship. Alhamdulillah, I think it was really, really inspiring, and we're going to conclude our show now. So inshallah, we will wrap up and again be here, same time, same place, inshallah, if everything goes well till then. From 12 to 2. And remember to head over to YouTube channel Wellness with Angela and Safiya, and you'll find all of our shows there.
Previous
I think it's
ones.
about 26 now. Please comment, like, share, subscribe, support us, because the more you support us, the more we can bring good content to you that is inshallah inspiring and helping you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.